2 years ago, we purchased 350,000 comic books, a once-in-a-lifetime find as it pertains to comic book collections. And the two questions that we get asked the absolute most: one, how much did we spend? And two, what were the best books that we found? And I intend to answer both of those questions here today.
Once in a lifetime is an understatement when you think about it, because I have been collecting and dealing full-time for 25 years. And you, the same, nearly your entire life. I have never had an experience like this when it came to getting a collection. We have books spanning from 1939 to 2021. And when I speak to other dealers who are aware of this collection, who've been in this hobby 40 years plus, they have never even had the opportunity to get a collection like this. You guys have to hang on for this ride.
We had those moments actually happen in person where we're searching for something, hoping that we'll find a gem, hoping we'll find that one giant book, and we did, and I can't wait to talk about it today.
This almost didn't happen. We're talking 9 stressful weeks for me of a bidding war, and it was intense. All of a sudden, there's 3 parties going back and forth on this collection. We also had to bid on books that we never got to see. Everything was in boxes. 350,000 comics is a lot. So we were only privy to see a small margin of what's truly there and hope that we're gonna get profits in a downturning market as well.
It cost us over $20,000 just to move and house these comics, because it's a lot of space, and trucks to move them around. Over $100,000 to grade the books that needed to be graded, but it was well worth it. We spent $350,000.
There's actually quite a bit more to still grade. We've only been through half of the collection. A lot of the vintage stuff is already put aside, but we got to dig. So I expect at least another $50,000 in grading fees to happen in 2025 alone.
Comic hunting is so much fun and it's so exciting, but it's also filled with a lot of disappointment most of the time. The comics that are worth a lot of money are very rare, so you seldomly find them. What I wanted to try and piece together in this conversation with you, Jeff, is taking our experience, looking through comics, not knowing what we were gonna find, and then stumbling upon greatness.
I first felt that this was going to be a decent collection because I did receive an email with a few photos. And from the pictures, I instantly felt that there's a chance there could be some decent quality books. But I never expected the amount of quality that we were going to walk into. And this is a very inconspicuous house. You would never assume that there's anything value in this home. Every shelf had stacks of books. There were books in bathrooms, laundry rooms. There was actually books stacked in showers.
In his cupboards, where you would typically put food, there were stacks of Wizard magazines and comic price guides and comics galore. I would randomly pick out a stack of books, and it was just a bunch of dollar bin books, some quarter bin books, and then in the middle, not bagged and boarded, an Amazing Spider-Man #1 first print.
And as exciting as that was only the beginning, because we ended up finding a section that had Golden Age books, which got me extremely excited because you just never know what's gonna happen. When you start seeing books from the early 40s, you're like, how far back does this go? We ran into some really amazing books. There was a Sensation 1. There was a Wonder Woman 1. There was a Batman 2, a Tech 34. It's like the 8th appearance of Batman. I'm hoping for certain books. And then as we go, all we see is superhero. Comes a book out of nowhere. The rarest book in the entire collection, a Punch 12.
When this guy was going through this stack of books and he got to this Punch 12, it wasn't bagged and boarded. There wasn't any intention of putting this comic in a special place. Like, this was just in a stack of books. We're talking about a book that has under 50 known to still exist. Jaw hit the floor. And we, mind you, we're doing these people a solid by pricing things and doing this all ethically, but we also have to kind of keep our composure, A lot of stress.
You have to keep your cool. You have to keep your composure. I've been dealing with Golden Age for a very long time. And if there's one thing you need to know about them, they've been around so long that you have to be aware that there could be missing pieces, incomplete stories, restoration. And we found that with the Sensation Comics 1, a lot of restoration on the cover. Wonder Woman 1 was missing a centerfold. A lot of great books in here. But this gentleman who owned this collection didn't even collect horror. Everything was superhero. So to see this Punch comics was literally like a punch in the face of absolute excitement. It was an extraordinary book to find and extremely rare, like you mentioned. You said 50, but there's only 35 blue labels of this book out there right now.
What I'm holding in my hands right now is Punch Comics number 12, one of the most wanted and scarce horror covers of all time. And really, when you take it all in, you get a real sense of death when holding this comic book. It's powerful. A full skull makes up the entire cover with such vibrant colors that really bring you in and demonstrate the chaos that's going on. From the gunfire to the blood trickling down the victim's left arm to the fallen damsel in distress that is hanging out of the mouth of the skull.
It's one of those covers that the longer you stare at it, the more comes to light. I mean, you see the bullet in the skull, so you're like, oh, that's another victim. You see the person hiding in the shadows in the nose, the other person hiding behind the shooter above the skull. It just keeps going. And then there's always the essence of filth with money, and there's money just tumbling in the bottom corner. It's just such a cool book. You can tell why it's iconic.
What's interesting is that in the inside of this comic, which was packed with value, mind you, 6 to 7 different stories are found in Golden Age comics, there isn't a whole lot of horror to be found in here.
It's very crime-driven, which crime can be very violent. And we're going to see that with the more horrific covers in the early 40s to maybe mid-late 40s, and then transition into a much stronger presence of horror in the early 50s to 1954.
There's something really special about dealing with a Golden Age comic book, like physically. There's a bit more weight to it. You know, these are bigger books, but the paper quality, tremendously better, thicker. There's more of a tactile experience when dealing with these collectibles. These pieces of art are actually on display in a larger way because the books themselves are bigger.
I need to also talk about the inks, like the colors on Golden Age books. They're not modern, but they're so special in their own way, and they feel so appropriate for that time frame and age. We've dedicated our lives to this hobby and comics, and if it's something that you or anybody in the audience wants to do, there's an opportunity that someday this could happen. But if it's not what you want for your life, there is a way to come as close as possible to obtaining a book like this.
I want to give a big thank you to Authentic Editions, the company that's doing a Kickstarter that sponsored this video. And what they're doing is incredible. They are promising with a Kickstarter that's already been funded to over $300,000, completely backed by over 1,000 different individuals, to bring back facsimile reprints of pre-code horror comic books, including Punch number 12. But this isn't just your traditional facsimile. This has never been done before.
They're soliciting that they're going to reproduce these books in a fashion as if you went back in time and were buying them off the newsstand yourself, down to the newsprint type of paper that they used in the 40s and 50s.
I'm not surprised in the slightest that this Kickstarter funded so quickly because they're taking 15 pre-code horror comics, some of the most renowned covers of all time in comic books, and giving them this special treatment so that you can experience them in all their glory in the way that they initially came out. And it didn't stop there because they have bound editions of these titles, full runs that you can collect and display, and it looks outstanding.
I hope this is just the beginning because I spoke to other collectors about this. I wanted to get their perspective. They were most excited because they wanted to have it in the most natural state, reproduced with the paper interiors, plus having the ads. This has already been funded, long past. If you're just hearing about it now, I'm sorry, you missed out. Or did you?
Oh no, Jeff, they have more time. They have a few more days. Although on Kickstarter, it does say that the entire project has concluded, you can still enroll and get whatever perks you want up until December 7th. We chatted with Authentic Editions, who kept this live because they knew we were going to chat about this with our audience. So if you want to get in on this pre-code horror goodness, link in the description. Go check it out. There's a lot of different tiers that you can join. But I do know that there's one book on this list that may have made you feel a certain way, Jeff.
I know which book you're talking about because it hurts. It hurts.
We're talking about Suspense number 3, which is going to press courtesy of this Kickstarter. And I'm sure there's a part of you that has some negative feelings about this book, but also some excitement that you're going to be able to acquire it again. Because I've heard that this is not a book that you like brought up a whole lot.
Man, like I mentioned, I've been doing this for a very long time. This is my biggest seller's regret, and there is no close second. Suspense Comics 3. 15 years ago, I had a copy. It was incomplete. It was missing a centerfold. The thing to know about this book, it's a single staple book, so it's very common for this book to not be complete. But I bought it at a convention, and I quickly flipped it, and I always thought I would have another opportunity to get one, and I haven't since, unless I want to fork out some oodle number of dollars. On the rare chance that one of the 26 graded copies comes to market.
We're talking a book from 1944. Alex freaking Schomburg, one of the kings of the golden age. And this book last sold this year, a 1.5, one of the most ugliest 1.5s that you can get, really, for over $50,000. This book is hyper scarce, hyper wanted, and there was no chance that we'd be able to find one for this video. Would love to show you one in person. I've never seen one in person.
Damn, I love this book.
But not for any crazy reason, right? Because there's a lot going on in this cover.
Oh, absolutely not. For a book from 1944 to have this outlandish of a cover, it speaks volumes of how wild it is. I mean, you have hooded characters wearing swastika armbands, and a gal in bondage about to be impaled with another hooded character in some sacrificial pose about to nail her with a sword. And some hero, which it's supposed to be Kid Terrific, is gonna save her against 15 dudes with guns with one spear.
It's a loud cover, it's a powerful cover, and it makes sense why so many people want it. And it's kind of like, I know you just said it, but let that sink in. 26 of these are known to exist on the census right now. Sure, there may be some raw copies out there, but very likely under 40 copies. This isn't even really a horror comic book. The cover's so sensational that it gets roped into that genre of collectible. And it's comics like these, because of how tough they are to acquire and how grandiose of a cover they truly are, that they become some of the most wanted collectibles in comics, but also Americana in general.
After finding a Punch 12, I was hopeful that there may be somewhere a Suspense Comics 3.
You even said, dude, you're like, oh, maybe there's a Suspense 3, man. We found the Punch 12. Maybe there's a Suspense 3. I don't know if it's going to be in there, dude.
Yeah, I think you're right. After going through this as much as I have, I'm probably 99.999% sure it's not in there. But maybe a facsimile edition may fill the hole in my heart a little bit.
But the book that I was hoping we would find, and there's still a chance, is uncovering a book that I have never owned personally. A Chamber of Chills number 19. I'm a big Misfits fan, you know, Danzig, and the cover to Die, Die, My Darling, the single, was literally a rip of this cover. Like, they just took that cover and put it on the record. So I've always had a love for this comic book, but also since it's a Golden Age horror and a pre-code horror book, I've always wanted one. Well, the last copy this month, a 4.0, sold for $10,000. Tough to acquire. Not as rare as the other books. However, this is a book that will be reprinted through this Kickstarter.
It's a Lee Elias cover, who's an absolute legend when it comes to horror covers. There's only about 140 of these books in a blue label, so it's not the most rare of books, but the demand is there, so it's still very expensive to own. And if we're using terms like pre-code and you don't quite know what that means, there was a time when the comic books were being held accountable for causing problems in teen youths. And so due to a gentleman named Frederick Wortham, a psychologist who wrote a book, Seduction of the Innocent, there became a famous court case, and comics ultimately had to have a code to follow by, and that's called the Comic Code Authority.
Comics were being labeled as a perversion, you know, causing people to want to throw them away, to burn them in bonfires in the 50s. That's why these are so scarce to come by. And Chamber of Chills is a great example of a story where you kind of see where they were coming from, because these were marketed to kids.
I mean, of the three books we discussed, Chamber of Chills 19 is a true horror book. I mean, every story in here, I believe, is a horror story. And you have this blonde bombshell on the cover with a skeleton hand holding up a champagne glass, and you can see in the reflection death side of her. We don't really know until we open up this book and read the first story.
The story is called Happy Anniversary, and the first page is gripping. It brings you right in. You got two skeleton figures rejoicing in celebration.
After this initial image will grab you, when you open the book, we go down 2 panels, and we see this lovely gal in a kitchen, dressed very nicely, and she's just saying out loud to her husband, the champagne is chilling, and they're excited to celebrate their 10th anniversary.
The husband's in the other room, and she is just loudly proclaiming how special it is that they've made it this long in their relationship, although they've had some troubles in the past. We're talking fights and infidelity and things that people sometimes unfortunately go through, but 10 years is a milestone, and she is preparing their anniversary party.
But quickly he's revealed that he's been dead the entire freaking time. If she can't have him, no one can.
Oh, and that's why they didn't want kids reading these books, but you can still back the Kickstarter, enjoy Golden Age comic books, and of course, as always,
Boo! Geek responsibly.
Enough said.